All the politicians that been in Alberta for at least 100 years, they try to negotiate with Ottawa. They try to communicate to negotiate in good faith. There's nothing that Alberta can do within Canada to be advantageous at this point. So the only thing it can do is to leave Canada at this point. And that, for me to learn that and to accept that rationale, it took me about a year. The current state of Canada is not the Canada I grew up in, and it's not the Canada that we want for children to begin to be born at, right? So, in essence, Alberta is becoming what Canada used to do, was to be nostalgia and elbows up. That's all they got. I saw firsthand how mainstream media are professionally and professionally trained uh, to lie to people in things that you're not even in ways you're not even capable of understanding. The moment that media outlets started to take money from the government, right? That's when the quality of service, should I say, for lack of a better word, started to tank drastically, exponentially. All we need to do now is to convince the younger people to take a camera, a $200 mixer, and a StreamYard subscription and do videos. It's not hard, and speak their minds. And we need to empower that. We need to empower the younger generation to do to speak their minds.
Thank you so much to Max from Freedom Calendar for joining us. And you have been doing a tireless job of being able to be there on the ground filming a lot of the events. And we really want to thank you for that, because as a channel that has used a lot of your videos, it's been very great to be able to have that information and be able to disseminate it even further. It's very important with specifically grassroots movements like this.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. It's a pleasure and a blessing, and let's aim for a good show.
Yes. And first of all, I always ask all our guests where they can find you, because we want people to go follow you, find you, and look at all the content that you've been creating.
Okay, so on YouTube, my YouTube channel is called Freedom Calendar, in two words. And all my social media accounts, such as X, Rumble, Facebook, Telegram, is as well. It's using freedomcalendar.net. And the reason for that is because there's a history component. We can talk later. But basically, freedomcalendar.net was originally and still, to some degree, a website for events for like many people. It started as an app for events. So you can look on freedomcalendar.net and you can see which events are in your area. You can search for that and everything and everything. And after that, I made a business decision to get into the audiovisual component of this. So I wanted to record events. I know I think I might be ahead of one of your questions, but it's essentially if you go on social media, go on YouTube, search for Freedom Calendar. It's got the one rose, can't miss it. But all the social media platforms like Facebook, Rumble, X is freedomcalendar.net. It's a That is just a plain limitation within YouTube. I cannot use a website as the channel name, unfortunately. And the handle is fcalendar.net. So Foxtrot, Calendar, Delta, Oscar, Tango, and ET.
Perfect. And all those are linked down below. So please do go follow Max there, because again, the work he's been doing is amazing. And we are astounded as well and very thankful for all the work that you've been doing. And we do want to, because you're the essentially man behind the camera, we do want to ask to tell us a little bit about yourself and what motivated you and what experiences motivated you to be where you are today.
So I was born in Chile, and my parents moved here to Canada in 2002, and I lived in Quebec for 20 years. That was my accent ish. And then about almost 4 years ago, I moved to Alberta because I didn't want it to. I basically escaped the French Quebec version of communism. So So in order to regain my insanity, I decided to move west. My background is in technology. I spent roughly 12 years working in IT. I was working in voice over IP deployments and network architecture infrastructure. And for the last, when I was working down east, I spent roughly 3 years in project management and infrastructure deployment. I installed pretty much in the city I was living at. I installed pretty much half of the VoIP infrastructure in the city over there, which is great. But in Alberta, I still working in IT. I worked there for a while, for about 3 years in IT, and I think that I always try to, while I was working in IT, while I was working in general, I was being curious about other things to do. And one of the things that really piqued me the curiosity is audiovisual and sound. I have a unfinished degree in electrical engineering, just FYI, but that's how I learned most of the audio stuff that is associated with sound management and signal processing. When I was in school, in high school, I was the guy working with the sound system at the local high school radio station over there, right? And I help other people doing DJs and stuff to setting up their audiovisual stuff. So I was always either working with computers or working with sound and video to some extent. So that's what I kind of like about doing this thing with Freedom Canada, at least for the video component, is be able to touch technology. And that is something that I'm a huge geek, by the way. I'm a huge stan. I'm a huge Star Trek fan, for those who know. So I'm a huge fan of technology, and I like playing with technology as well too.
Well,
So
and
I'm
well, how did you choose Alberta? You came from Quebec to Alberta. What made you choose Alberta over Saskatchewan or British Columbia? Was it work or something else?
Oh, that's an interesting thing because when I was trying to leave Quebec to head to other places, I was basically shopping. I was probably even getting to my home country in Chile. I was thinking about moving to the States. I was thinking about moving to Saskatchewan, Alberta. And obviously my background in IT led me to a lot of contacts, and one of those contacts are in Edmonton specifically. So I was thinking about moving to Edmonton, specifically in Alberta, and also I was looking at Saskatchewan as well to what's happening there. Uh, so to the question is, what made you move to Alberta or Saskatchewan? Are simply the result of connections that I had in the past that made me push to move to Alberta specifically. And also, while I was talking to my friends, my neighbors, they lived in Edmonton. They live in Alberta as well. My past neighbor down east, he lived in Fort Saskatchewan for I believe 7 years, and he was a welder. And after work, we're discussing about what it is to move to Alberta, expenses wise, and all those things about the specifics. And one of my old friends that he used to work for CN Rail, he's retiree now. He worked in Edmonton for about 25 years. So based on the talks that I had with people over time, I gained more experience to by moving to Alberta as opposed to living in Saskatchewan because they lived in Alberta in the past. So that kind of convinced me to move here to Alberta instead of Saskatchewan, Florida, whatever it is, basically.
Well, Florida would be a lot warmer, but then that kind of leads into my next question, which is what made you decide to, or what led you to support Alberta independence specifically?
Oh, that's an interesting thing because when I moved here to Alberta, I wasn't very open to the idea of independence. You know, I was following what's happening in Alberta. I actually followed the leadership race of the United Conservative Party just after Jason Kenney was ejected from the UCP. And now we have Daniel Smith. I watched the leadership race from NL East. I was watching this from uh, the ancestor of Junior News. I think it's True North
True
News.
North,
Yeah, True
yes.
North.
Yeah. Fantastic. So I was watching the whole thing moving forward. And when I moved here to Alberta, I wasn't like keen or receptive to the idea of independence. In fact, when I moved here to Alberta, I moved under the impression and under the assumption that Alberta would stay in Canada. I didn't want Alberta to separate at all. And this is what I'm saying to you is public domain. And I said to my friends all the time, I wasn't a open for separation in the first place, at least when I moved here. Then when I started to get more socialized with people here in the area, I was introduced to the Alberta Prosperity Project, just probably on my first and second month here in Alberta, and I've started to talk with people who are here, who lived through the NEP period, the National Energy Program in the 80s, and how the Trudeau senior government actually screwed them over. Many people lost their businesses and everything. And then I started to attend one of those town hall meetings. And the guy who really convinced me was of the name of Michael Wagner, who's going to be, well, I'm going to be live streaming his speech, by the way, on Thursday, by the way, just FYI. And he was talking about the energy program, how Alberta was disadvantaged in this confederation. And no matter what happened, um, Stephen Harper was doing something. All the politicians that been in Alberta for at least 100 years, they try to negotiate with Ottawa. They try to communicate to negotiate in good faith. There's nothing that Alberta can do within Canada to be advantageous at this point. So the only thing it can do is to leave Canada at this point. And that for me to learn that and to accept that rationale, it took me about a year, probably almost 2 years. um, and and for many of your viewers as well, what actually what actually convinced people into the independence train was when Mark Carney was installed as a prime minister of Canada. When people realize that your votes don't matter, that's when people said, "I'm done. I'm done." And that's interesting because I used to, I say that I used to live back east in Quebec specifically. I didn't know the just how corrupt, or should I say, I didn't know how my perception of federal politics really changed when I was here. The fact when people in Alberta say that the elections get uh, are decided at 8 p.m. Mountain, while in down east is probably 10 p.m. because of time changes. And then you need to then you get to know who's going to be the next prime minister. That is something that you cannot see out east. When you're living down over there, just see the eastern side of things, the eastern side of politics. When you move west, you see the western side of things, the western side of politics, which are completely opposites. And this is something that, unless you move to Alberta or Saskatchewan and you experience a federal election, you will not notice.
After you started supporting Alberta Independence, from there, how did you then decide to start filming all the events and making it into a project, or going to
Yeah,
everything and deciding to let
yeah.
everybody else see them?
That's funny because I was filming videos before the election. My first videos were recorded, I believe, in November, January 2024. That's when I have my tripod sitting on my cell phone sitting on a tripod, and basically recording the secondhand noise from the audience. And I know that's one of the questions, but I saw that as an opportunity for high density quality videos. If I want to live stream or recorded videos, I wanted to do it properly with good sound. As I mentioned, I I was basically working in I have a very intuition to sound and signal processing as well. So I wanted to give the best sound ever, and that cannot be accomplished with a cell phone and a tiny microphone. So I was started recording videos way before the election. And when I have the election, I found my guys. I got my guys from. I think I found Carrie Lambert, Chris Scott. I think about 5 or 6 podcasters and had it on my show and want to talk about the next step. And that was like on April 29, I believe. And the next week, we have this massive rally in Edmonton on May the 3rd, by the way, just 1 year passed. And that is when I started to record with actual sound equipment so I can get the best sound quality. And I sincerely believe that if we need to document the Alberta Independence train, we need to do that with higher end equipment and higher means of production. Because if you look at what's happening, for example, from the National Archives of Canada, by the way, if you're in French, there is a documentary called Le Confort et l'Indifférence. It's a documentary, a 2 hour documentary, which explains in a 2 hour format the independence train in Quebec and what it led to the success of the campaign and the fall of the campaign. But that video was made through with footage that was made at that time during the campaign period, during the talks period, when during the get out the vote phase, you know. So I thought that it will be a good thing to do to record videos on the ground of what's happening. And quite frankly, most people don't like people my age. I'm 35. They don't go on town halls just for the fun of it. Just gonna watch their phones, right? That's how they consume the media. The people who are on the town halls, they're probably about 60 or 55, you know. So basically I was recording videos before the election, and after the election I decided, okay, I think it's going to be interesting to record the independence train from many groups and points of view, and that kind of stuff too. So
And how much work is it? Because it must be a lot of equipment. I mean, we have a home studio and it's quite a bit of things that we have to use. So I imagine, and I can see kind of there behind you a little bit of it, but how hard is it to travel and to bring everything with you and to set it up and then break it
oh.
down?
So basically, in order to, so I have basically uh, a very detailed explanation or time frame on how things are happening. So I have a planning phase, which is 30 minutes. During that period of time, I contact my coordinator to say when the event's going to be, if there's any accommodations, if I'm going to stay overnight, where I'm going to stay overnight. And one of the first questions is I ask is, what's the earliest I can be on site? Because it takes about 2 hours, like 1.5 hours to deploy everything. 90 minutes. That's my standard. So basically 1 hour on site to do everything, the cabling, the sound, the equipment, everything in between. So during that 30-minute phase, I ask where the event's going to be, if there's any accommodations, that kind of stuff. The second phase is another 30 minutes, and that is me generating the posters, generating the social media links on 5 platforms at once, like YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, Telegram, and Face and X, the posters, and put it on the Freedom Calendar website. So the app version will be able to pick that up. So that's another 30 minutes. So when you have those Let's Talk Alberta tours, I always try to do like 4 events at once because it saves me time and planning. So that's another. So let's pretend I make a video just for one event is half an hour. Then packing everything that I have on the back into my car, that's another half an hour, more like 20 minutes because I'm ultra fast and I drive and I run a lot. So that helps. And then after this, what I do is that I'm going to wherever I need to do. So if I'm going from Edmonton, let's say to Red Deer, that's 2 hours. If I go to next week, I'm going to Sexsmith, which is by Grand Prairie, that's another 5, 6 hours. So exclude the time it takes to drive. Then on site, deploy your kit, that's 2 hours. Then your entire event, that's you're normally about 3.5, 4 hours. Then tear down, we're talking about 0.75 hours to 1 hour. And then basically pack everything in your car and go to your next place and go to sleep. So when people say on average, when people watch a 2, 3 hour live stream, That requires about 7, 8 hours of work.
Because you've had this front row seat to the movement itself, almost from its inception in this latest iteration, because there has been, once it started to get legs under it and ground under it, what are the most surprising things that you have seen or that you've witnessed having that front row seat to all of these talks and conversations and the movement itself?
Mosquitoes on summer and people don't know how to use their microphones, especially during the Q&A. And deers in winter time and mooses. No, for real, for real. What I've learned is when you do a video stream, like a stream on everything, what I kind of like is, and kind of what I've learned is the reactions from the people. I got to be like, I got many people say, "Hey, Max, thanks for what you're doing. Thanks for what you're doing. Yada yada yada. Thanks for do what you're doing. That's awesome. It really helps." But I think that what I've learned as well is how to deal with the equipment and how to make it in such a way that the stream is as reliable as possible. Most of the people that I've seen recording videos are doing like things like this, and the sound they're going to get is from the microphone, but it's not going to be the best sound. So what I've learned is to make sure that the stream is as reliable as possible, because that's the way I think people expect from Freedom Canada is to deliver a reliable stream with good sound and good video quality. And that's the thing that I kind of learned to maintain as well. I learned how to properly and efficiently record the sound specifically to make it more like more rich and without interruptions and without sound glitching and everything. So I think that to maintain good quality sound and good video quality is what I think I've learned over time, to answer your question. So this is what I've learned basically, is to maintain a very reliable and sustain very reliable stream basically.
And we do know, and from personal experience, we do know that having sound is one of the most important things. Proper crisp sound is one of the most important things when trying to get someone to stay and watch a
Yeah,
video. So that it's
I
good
am.
that you learned that.
And that's interesting because one of my mentors, my business mentors, as I was going, I have a conversation with one of my business mentors and one of my technical mentors as well, because I'm surrounded with technical people as well too. One of the questions I ask is, "Hey, I'm going to the audiovisual business. Where should I put the money in there? Should I put on the camera or on the audio? Right or bad audio? Because you can have a 8K camera with 36 optical lenses with shitty sound. Nobody's going to pay attention to that. But if you listen to that in an audio stream, that on its own, it's helping a lot. People will be more keen to listen to the video if it's got good sound. In fact, uh, I remember a while ago, I remember a while ago, I have a video interaction with a media producer, and he's got this amazing video, like this amazing 30-minute video, insanely large file. But he was only capturing the video from the stage and was very muffly. It was very bad. So you can have the best camera on earth, but if your sound is bad, it doesn't make a difference. People are paying to sound. And in fact, people actually tell me that they watch their videos. They actually listen to the videos. They don't watch it, they listen to. Like they put this thing on X, they go take a coffee, they go whatever they need to do, and they just listen to the video. They don't watch it, they listen. So people are paying more attention to the audio more than the video itself.
And also, I wanted to ask, aside, we've seen during when you're recording sometimes at these events, you've ran into mainstream media. Even at one point, they wanted to ask to use your stream or your feed to use it themselves. So, how have those interactions been with the mainstream media? Because as independent media, we know we might be eating their lunch quite a bit, and they're getting jealous and angry about it.
It's a dead end problem. Basically, I one of my I'm very I have a very bad experience with mainstream media a lot, and I take it on the shin like a man. But here's the thing: when I was in politics in 2019, I was somehow involved with the People's Party of Canada because at that time I didn't know, right? And I saw firsthand how mainstream media are professionally and professionally trained uh, to lie to people in things that you're not even in things in ways you're not even capable of understanding. I see them, they're paid liars, and unfortunately, they should be treated as such. And unfortunately, or fortunately for us, we have to fill the gap of the mainstream media because now we have folks like yourself, you have folks like me, basically taking control of the information right now moving forward. And I think that you need to take that roles as well. As for the mainstream media, I have two rules for the mainstream media. If you treat me badly, you're gonna treat me as the way you treated me. If you want me to get on the mixer without paying, well, no, you're not gonna get the sound. If you get the sound and you need from me, if you need something from me, then I'm gonna have to send an invoice first and foremost. And some people take offense, and some people give offense. And to be honest, I think at this point of time, I think that the mainstream media or the legacy media need to earn, if they want to earn the respect from the public, they need to do what they used to do back then 30 years ago. I remember I was with John Bolton, and he was giving a speech in Red Deer from the Bearing Witness, a show with Jason Levine. Fantastic show. And what he was saying is from the moment that media outlets started to take money from the government, right? That's when the quality of service, should I say, for lack of a better word, started to tank drastically, exponentially, for lack of a better word. So what happened is that what he was saying is that that behavior 40 years ago was unthinkable 40 years ago. The fact that you're taking money from the government in order to satisfy your needs or to keep the business going is repulsive and unprofessional at best. And that's what he's saying for that. And I think that if because the legacy media failed to adapt to the current technology, to the current trend, and now they're essentially basically lying to your audience, right? Basically lying to your audience and telling them that because you're taking money from the government, you're now subjected to say whatever the government is telling you to do. I've seen in Quebec firsthand, specifically in Quebec specific, that's a very interesting story. Talking media here. Quebec specifically, well, they talk French, they speak French, right? They don't speak English that much unless you live in Montreal or you're blessed enough to learn English, right? So what happens during the scamdemic in 2019? The largest cable provider, which is called Quebecor, Videotron, which is owned by Quebecor, which now owns Freedom Mobile, Joseph OI, they were basically slandering all the people who were opposed to the vaccination status. They were very nasty, and they were basically saying that we're criminals that want to kill a bunch of people and everything, right? And that is essentially a media outlet paid by the provincial government. And because the in people in Quebec don't necessarily speak English all the time, or they're not very fluent, that kept people in a bubble, in a perfect airtight bubble. So people, if you want to get information or if you want to get an alternative point of view, you gotta speak English. Otherwise, you'll have to translate into French what we're talking about, right? So the media, the legacy media right now has lost their prestige that they once have. They basically took the money from the government and they basically are basically lying to the people. The worst offenders are CBC, the Communist Broadcasting Corporation, as the worst offenders on earth, especially because they're publicly funded. If you look at their balance sheets, they're absolutely atrocious. Another guy that is another company that I have very mixed feelings is CTV, and The other one is essentially global news from the Chorus. And by the way, Chorus stock is less than 10 cents right now. So they're being nuked in the marketplace. And that's, I think, by doing what they're doing right now, that's what they deserve, to be honest with you. I might sound a little harsh on them because I am harsh on them.
Oh no, so are we. Don't worry. And it's interesting also you mentioned there just quickly, John Bolton and Abundant yourself and even us in a way. There's a lot of people that do come from the information space that used to be, I guess, and that we no longer see anymore. And that, but we remember that as well. And do think independent media is going to be and has been incredibly important for the movement, and it will continue to be. So what do you, as we start and move towards the campaign season for the October 19th referendum, what do you think is the most important aspect for not just us, but everybody to focus on and focus the efforts on?
I would say that what we need to focus is by staying together and focus on one objectives. The main Many people in the grassroots movement are basically waiting for a leader to come. And if you look at the comment section, even yourself, they're saying, "We need a leader. We need a leader." The answer is we don't need leaders. What we need is many groups working together into the same objective, and perhaps doing collaborations like we're doing right now with me, having many people working together. That's not your end. That's outside. That's a helicopter outside. Just FYI, don't filter it out. That's my audio gear side of things that came. So what happens is that we need to work together in the same objective. And if there's any mistakes that are done by various groups, that needs to be addressed concurrently. We agree in the grassroots that we cannot have a single point of communication. We're gonna have folks like yourself, like myself, folks like Jason Levine and many others promoting this message of Alberta independence in an effective manner. But we cannot, if we put everyone into one single group, Elections Alberta, the CRA, and all those institutions are going to put all their energy into that specific group. When we are like 16 or 18 groups or what have you, it's significantly harder uh, to to shut us down, basically. And this is something that Kathy Flett, she is talking about a lot, is that back in the days, from the independence stream about 6 7 years ago, that's the thing they've learned from, is that right now it's extremely hard for the independence stream to shut down, because we have all those players coming up. You have yourselves and also all the other groups as well. When I interviewed Mitch Sylvester, I was asking the question, that's going to be the next phase. And his next phase will be on the information warfare campaign, as I call it, right? You got folks like the Alberta Prosperity Project, which is now going to education mode, because during the SFA period, the State Free Alberta period, started from January 2nd, 2026 to May the 4th, 2026, the Alberta Prosperity Society was basically on hold from a accounting perspective, right? They were not doing anything. Only State Free were doing all the heavy lifting required to do the canvassing effort, right? But you're going to see folks like APP starting to do other independence events. You're going to see Chris Scott, he's doing his own speeches now. I'm going to do one of his speeches. I'm going to do a town hall on Thursday, the 7th, I believe, right? And we have other groups that will come up promoting town halls on Alberta independence. So now what's going to happen is that we're going to have a group in, let's say, in Edmonton, another group in GP, another group in Red Deer, another group in Lethbridge, another group or another event in Edson, Lloyd, whatever it is. So the message is going to be spread much more efficiently. And for that, we need multiple groups working together as a whole. So,
Well, and do you think maybe not necessarily a leader, because we've talked to other people and everybody says a leader, but maybe a committee, because there's already decentralized voices that are in leadership roles like Keith Wilson, Jeff Rath, Mitch. Maybe having a little bit of a committee so they can give an overall kind of game plan and disseminate some information out.
Like spokespeople.
Spokespeople, I guess.
Um, it is not the right moment right now to put a leader as it is right now. At Joseph OI, many people in the grassroots, like we call, I don't call myself a leader, to be honest, not at all, not at all. But I think that I've been in this grassroots environment for a long time, that many people who are pulling the strings are or very influential. They all have their cell phone numbers to a lot of people, right? We all have a way to connect each other, and so as you said, we are going where there are many groups working together onto the same objective, which is Alberta independence, to be able to leave Canada for real. But the way it's being done is that eventually, if you want to have like a committee or something, that's going to be determined, I think. And I don't speak on behalf of everybody. I'm just speaking for myself. I think they will be determined after October 19th during the negotiation phase, after when we're going to deal with it with Ottawa. That's where I think where leaders are going to, or people influential are going to come up in a committee as such, in a very organized way. But I don't think it is right now. If you're waiting for a leader, you're essentially asking for political suicide, and strategically it is nonsense.
And also, speaking of kind of on that same vein, I'm sure at the events you've met at least some people that might be either on the fence or against Alberta independence, or just on the ground, maybe. But do you remember meeting anybody like that, or what their arguments were?
Nostalgia and elbows up. That's all they got. Canada, if you want to really understand what's happening, my suggestion is to listen to Michael Wagner, okay? Because he's an historian and he's a huge nerd, which I really like. And this guy is basically saying, and including myself, Canada used to be a good country. I mean, you guys are in Mexico right now. Why do you think you fled Canada right now? Because it was turned into a communist state, right? The Canada that is the current state of Canada is not the Canada I grew up in, and it's not the Canada that we want for children to begin to be born at, right? So, in essence, Alberta is becoming what Canada used to do, was to be. In fact, I had Dennis Kalma in my show, and we're talking about the document of value of freedom. You can look that up. And we were talking about immigration. Like, as I said, I was born in Chile. In Chile, got my passport, my Canadian Chilean passport, right? So I'm a fully citizen here. But here's the kicker: he wanted to introduce this idea of the pointing score that was used to select future immigrants to head into Canada. Back in the days, if you want to move to Canada, the Canadian government was looking at people like they were looking at young families, ideally professionals, who are willing to sell everything to move to Canada with their young families. So when those children become adults, they will have families on their own. That's what the federal government was looking at that, and they were using a scoring system that they used throughout the years up until Trudeau was installed as the Prime Minister of Canada, right? So that's what happened when we align that, and when we say on the independence movement, we say we want this system. We were told we're traitors. We were told that we're racist. We were told that we're white supremacists and all the adjectives that the left likes to throw at us. But in fact, this system was used by the Canadian government 30 years ago. So, in an essence, what the proponents, the people who are opposing to Alberta independence, they're clinging to a past. They clinging to a Canada that does not exist. And I think that the people who are really advocating and against Alberta independence are senior people, generally speaking, or brainwashed people. That's the only thing I can possibly think of. Because when you outline the facts as to why Alberta needs to leave Canada, and I was on that, I was the prototypical forever Canadian, just FYI. Once you're aligned the facts, staying in Canada doesn't make sense. I mean, I moved to Alberta with the assumption that Alberta will never separate. And here we are making videos on Alberta independence.
And making videos on Alberta Independence and talking about it, and because I'm guessing you basically do it 24/7 in your head even, are there any specific strategies that you see as we move into campaign or just in general, that aren't really discussed yet or that haven't been spoken about as much, but that you consider are important to also bring up?
Two things I can think about it is the city versus rural divide. When I have Mitch on my show, he was basically saying, and I said on my show many times, is that the people who are working in rural areas, these are the producers. I disagree. I think everybody's producing at some degree of form. If you're looking at the rural communities or the countryside, their main economic factor is agriculture, landscaping, exploration, oil and gas. If you're up in the north, if you go to any kind of, if you go to any uh, any farm in Alberta, somebody has an oil pump jack to generate money to the business, right? So that's the rural Alberta side of things, right? On the city side of things, you got people who work in the technology sector. You got people who work in the administration, people who work in sound gigs, like in entertainment, as I'm trying to do now. People who work in very specialized industries. So basically, what we need to do, and this is to answer your question, we need to adjust the message from a 100% rural Alberta messaging to a more urban messaging. Because if you look at what's happening right now, what we're seeing, the prototypical Albertan is a guy who has a cowboy hat, drives a pickup truck, and is on a horse and is on the field. Yes, that's the rural prototypical point of view, but what's in the city? Crickets. And that's what the left is actually monopolizing right now. Because right now, what they're saying is that nothing in the cities is appealing to conservatism. But I think that what the independence train needs to do now is to change the messaging, and I think they're going to that direction. At least when I talk with Mitch, they're going to appease, they're going to at least offer a messaging for the people who live in the cities, because Alberta Independence, let's face it, is going to help everybody who lives on a farm, who takes film from UFA, to the guy who works on IT and pulls some fiber optic cables off the rack. That doesn't change things. Another thing that needs to be worked on is the multiculturalism point of view, especially in the cities. In rural areas, pretty much everyone thinks the same. Pretty much everyone around the, let's say, Red Deer thinks the same. They all like-minded folks like myself, which is great. They're all conservatives, and if you go on the south side of the province, like Fort McLeod, Nanton, Claresholm, we call this the Belt Bible of Alberta. These are the people who are willing to have a Bible in their trucks. I do, and things like that. But if you go on the cities, it's much more diverse in the sense that we need to appease the immigrant community. And that's where the conservatives need to really focus on. Is on the conservative. It's on the immigrant community as well. And that's even that's as a fracture, because that's a fracture environment, because you have the newer generation, like post 2020 2015, who are very thankful of Justin Trudeau letting in here in Canada. But you have the older folks like myself who've been here in Canada for 25 years or more, who know what's happening to their country. Like, I got people from Russia, I got people from Ukraine. If you want to interview this guy, Igor Rizlev, he's a real estate agent in Calgary. Shameless plug here. He escaped communism. His grandfather, I think, was murdered or backstabbed to death because he refused to give his business to the government during the Soviet era. So I think that we need to focus on the messaging on rural versus cities, and the communities And even in the communities, we need to focus on the people who are, generally speaking, the people who are on board in independence are people who have been here in this country long enough to notice the difference between what happened after Trudeau was installed. And I said installed in a not colloquial way. The people who are after, who came here from 2015 and plus, these are the people who are, should I say, less open to idea of independence, although there could be a possibility of change.
Also, I would say a big group we might need to try to appeal to, especially in cities, which is going to be difficult, is going to be women, because typically men
Yes.
men always vote for freedom and independence. Women always vote for security as a block. Now, women in rural areas will sometimes vote for independence and freedom because of their families and their husbands. But in cities, that demographic of women is going to be hard to convince. Do you think there are any good arguments to have to convince them?
I'm just thinking here.
I kind of sprung the question on you, but it's something
No, no,
it's something I've
no,
been
no.
thinking about.
Your question is accurate. I'm just trying to say in a way that doesn't confuse people. You're right. Women can, specifically young women in academia, in universities, are very progressive. So that's a fact. So I think that in order to circumvent that, or at least bringing women to our perspective, is to have what you call like we need, people need to, like, especially universities, they need to start their own conservative groups, so women who are more progressive will at least hear the message of conservatism. um I think that women in general, they tend to vote liberal more than they do for men. That is a fact. Although the women in particular I don't think, yes, they vote liberal, but if you look at what's happening right now, why do you think women in general and social people in general, I think, like, I gravitate very well with conservatives, right? I'm willing to debate and talk, I'm willing to talk with a liberal, doesn't, I don't mind, right? But I think that in order to get the women vote, we need to present a more conservative lifestyle. So it's more like a cultural game more than the independence game. If we were, if those women who are in academia sees the advantage of being or embracing more conservative lifestyle, like having a husband, having kids, with and rooted in Christ. I'm a Christian. That's one of the things I need to be focused on, because they are young adults right up there. I'm going to have you on my show with Macy and Madison right now. I mean, there are people, there are young adults who are conservative.
Well,
They're
I,
just not showing up.
Yeah.
Well, I would also say I know they're going to be few and far between, but we should look for possibly liberals or people that are maybe NDP or women that do support Alberta independence. And if we can recruit them into the movement to be voices, I think that would be very, very effective into cities. But
Yeah.
that's just one thought that I had.
I think that there's going to be an effort from various groups, like specifically, I'm talking about the APPs or the LTAs of this world, that are going to look at the younger generation more and more. And as I mentioned before, the people who watch my channel, at least from the demographic side of things, the people who are on premises, they are over 50. Okay. I'm probably the only guy who is in the 25 to 40 age category. I'm 35, just so you know. The people who are watching online, I've seen kids like 18, 25, 32 watching online. So they just consume information differently. Doesn't mean they're not online and they're not on premises. And just to give us some perspective, the people who are on premises, on site, let's say in a town hall with 150 people, on average, I got 400, 500 people watching online. So we have more people watching on the younger generation, the younger cohort, that they watch this content more than they are on site.
And you also mentioned Macy and Madison from Home with Homes, and I think they're doing a fantastic job. And I'd love to even push them further in and say, like, yeah, they're great voices for specifically young women, and specifically they exemplify the what happens when you're able to think in a more conservative way but different way, and to be able to use your critical thinking. And I love that they continue to emphasize the importance of that as well. We interviewed them too, but I just think they're fantastic.
Well, they also have a libertarian strain to them. So I think within cities, libertarianism, I think we do have a lot of libertarians supporting Alberta independence. I think that's going to be very effective in Edmonton and Calgary.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. It is definitely a work in progress, but I think it's more cultural than just getting out the vote for the younger generation. I think it's more like a cultural setup that needs to be addressed. So when you have younger folks addressing this, it's more important than seeking independence. And I think that what we need to do now is to convince the younger people to take a camera, a $200 mixer, and a StreamYard subscription and do videos. It's not hard, and speak their minds. And we need to empower that. We need to empower the younger generation to do to speak their minds, because by doing so is going to incentivize the other the younger folks to do the same. And that's going to be a cascading effect, and the left is going to basically not cope very well. But it's not a problem at this point. I need that the younger generation needs to be, and they're basic too. Like they work in their families. Many of them they have young kids. They don't have time to open a YouTube channel and social media accounts. It's hard. I understand it.
Well,
I understand.
I also think the young people are going to come around when the question is 100% on the ballot. I think there's a disconnect for young people right now. They've lost hope in Canada. They don't believe in politics. But
Absolutely. Absolutely.
once that question is on that ballot, I think you're going to see a massive amounts of young people surge behind this movement. It is the renegade movement. It is the outlaw movement. It's the people versus the elites. Every single politician is lined up against this movement. It's set up for young people. I think the catalyzing moment will be when the ballot gets on, or the question gets on the ballot.
Oh, absolutely. I totally understand it. And this is something that we acknowledge in the grassroots, that the younger generation is the silent majority. Although it's very hard to quantify that as well. The people who are basically uh, not in favor of independence on the younger cohort are the young group of professionals, but they will soon realize that how is that your down payment is going to be $45,000 for a down payment, or if you want to get a car, even a used car, that's going to be in the realm of $7,000, for a car that has, let's say, 250,000 miles, right? It's insane. But I think they're most affected by independence. And if you look at the numbers from the Conservative Party of Canada, their base was the younger folks. They were begging Pierre Poliver to go on Joe Rogan's podcast, because that's where all the folks are consuming. They'd rather listen to Joe Rogan than CTV News.
Yeah, believe me, we were begging him as well, but to deaf ears, and dollar short, a day late and a dollar short with Pierre Polyev always. But you have mentioned, and now we know how much of a busy man you are, and thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. And we're gonna let you go, but we always have one last question we ask of all our guests, which is, what does freedom mean to you?
I want to give a no PG version of things, but I'm gonna try. If you want to give what freedom looks like, I'm gonna give you two answers. One is the scene from Demolition Man, when Edgar Friendly was on the sewers, and he's basically saying, I want high cholesterol. I want to rub my tits on a jelly or something. This speech is freedom, but this is like the funny version of freedom, if you will, the satirical version of freedom, which is fine. But I think it's be able to make our own destiny. I always been It's be able to address our own destiny, uh, be able to make our own decisions like adults, and not being babysitted by Ottawa. And if you look at the history of Ottawa, if you look at the history of how Alberta, watch the videos from Kathy Flat, by the way. Alberta and Saskatchewan never were created by the federal government to help the East. I think freedom is be able to do our own decisions without and be responsible for our own decisions. That's what freedom is, to my opinion. Aside from the ego friendly guy, this is just me, my because I watched too movie. I think I watched too much TV. I think.
Thank you so much, Max, for all your time and for interviewing with us, but not just interviewing with us, but also everything you've been doing, documenting, and essentially documenting a piece of history that I think will be invaluable. So thanks so much for sitting with us and letting us know you a bit better because you've been the man behind the camera, so to speak.
It is a very small. It's a very. I'm very humbled to be with you guys, and just notice that. Just tell you that this is a small. It's a your gratitude is not required.
I think it is.